Welcome to yet another long Beanie video, and this time, for a change of pace, we're not going to be staring at magazines for once. I'm going to be going through my collection, not all of it, but the more interesting ones. And so let me actually start off here with a little bit of a recap of where we are in my timeline of videos here. About 2 months ago, not quite, but close to 2 months ago, I recorded the unboxing video that has still not been uploaded yet. Because I wanted to make the follow-ups to it. Immediately after doing the unboxing, I recorded basically what I'm recording right now, but I'm redoing it now because I just didn't like how it came out necessarily. Then after that, I recorded the Beanie Mania 1 and 2 video, which I have no idea what the placement on that is going to be now, but either way, this is the collection showcase, not to be confused with the explaining the timeline thing, which I have not made and I don't know when I will. But this will be kind of doubling as that. So if you're going into this not having watched any of my other stuff and wondering what I'm talking about, basically what I'm going to be doing here is just kind of talking about the more interesting beanies I have in my collection. And I'm not going to be giving prices of them, but it's going to be just kind of an explanation of what makes them special. I would say if you don't know much about the hobby but are interested in learning, then this is probably going to be a good source of information. But I imagine most people are probably not going to want to sit through the entire thing just to hear me talk about one particular thing that you have to sift through the entire thing to find. So if you're just looking for values, just get the price guide. It's really that simple. But I don't want to just be like, hey, this one is rare, and then move on to the next one. I want to give a little bit of an explanation of everything. So we're going to pretty much just kind of get started here going through it chronologically. I've got this shelf extending up quite a bit further than you could see with the camera angle before. And I have spent more time than I'm willing to admit organizing how this shelf is laid out here. And so I'm not looking forward to taking everything down off of it and then having to restock it again. But basically we're going to be starting at the top there because we've got a lot of the older, rarer, more interesting ones up there, kind of getting down to more normal-ish ones over there. And then if you look back there and ignore all of the bags and mess and everything, you can't really see into my closet. You can see my elbow though, but I've got another 200 in there, and those are all commons for the most part, so we'll look at those at some point, but not today. So let's go ahead and get started here with the oldest ones that I have. There's going to be some redundant information here as well. If you've watched my other stuff, I'm going to be kind of repeating some things, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Before we continue with the video, first I'd like to take a look at the tag timeline here. I realize that's not as catchy as talk about parallel universes, but I work with what I've got. So, this timeline may look a bit imposing at first. There's a lot of information on here. The majority of it is actually pretty minor stuff that we're not going to worry about. I have it pointed out just to kind of indicate when changes were made to the tags, such as with the addresses or capitalization of things, just minor changes with tag formatting. So, if you have a beanie and you're curious when it came out, you can use this to kind of narrow down roughly the period when it was released. But in the majority of cases, that's not going to matter too much. The generations are much more important of an indicator. So, with the generations, the way this chart works is we've got two different rows. The top row is for the hang tags, bottom row is for the tush tags. The generations do not always line up with those, and whenever I refer to a beanie as being a particular generation, if I say if it's a Gen 3, that's going to be talking about the hang tag generation, unless I specify otherwise. So, without going over every single thing on here, the hang tags, we're going to have 5 different generations up until 2000. Of course, there are other ones that came out after that, but we're not going to worry about those in this video. And you can pretty much kind of tell the difference between these. There are minor variations within them. The first 3 have a few different versions depending on where they were released, for instance. But for the most part, 1 is a flat tag, 2 is a folding tag. That's the main difference between those. From 2 to 3, the lettering went from the skinny tie to the bubbled. And then 4 and 5 both have the yellow star on the front and the poem on the inside. The main difference between those is the font being used. 4 uses a mix of kind of more professional-looking fonts, including Times New Roman. Gen 5 uses Comic Sans. And then 5 also kind of streamlines things a bit. It gets rid of the style number, changed the way the birthday is formatted, and that kind of stuff. I also pointed out on the top row when the first Teeny Beanie promotion happened, and when Beanie Buddies were introduced. The Beanie Buddy one isn't super important, I just marked that to show when it happened, just for reference. The first Teeny promotion was important because that was the cause of a huge spike in collectors. It was when tie kind of became more of a household name and production increased a lot to meet the demands, so after that point, most beanies were very common. There's going to be a few exceptions for more rare ones, but not very many. Aside from that, the top row pretty much speaks for itself. Most of the things listed within the chart itself are going to be addresses or just minor changes within the tags that aren't too important. Beginning of Gen 4 says no website, and that one pretty much speaks for itself. There were versions that didn't have a website on the bottom, or were covered up in some way. Those can be worth a bit more. And at the beginning of Gen 5, we have the original and Sufis errors that appeared on a few different beanies. Those are commonly cited online as being rare errors, but they're not. They didn't appear on every beanie, but on the ones that they did, they were very common for the months that they were available. Focusing on the Tush tags, we've got 8 different generations, and the generations between 3 and 6 are extremely similar to each other, which is why I have a zoomed-in version of them. The differences between them are going to be the star to the left of the heart and the placement of the trademark and circled R, like copyright symbols, basically. Other than that, they are identical. Other things worth noting early on, I have marked where the Canadian Tush tag started showing up. It was around the start of the Gen 2 hang tag. That would continue all the way throughout the timeline, and that is an additional tag. It does not replace the other Tush tag. It will have both attached to it. The CE only applies to European tags, not anything too important to worry about for the most part. We've got a couple more errors, like the Suffrus typo. Again, not really anything too important. And at the start of 1998, we have the change from the PVC to PE pellets, which is another thing that many people will point out as a huge selling point if something has PVC pellets, but it almost never is. Only time it ever will be is on Princess, and in many cases, PVC is the only type of pellets that a beanie can have. Anything Gen 4 or earlier will have that, so it's very rarely anything worth pointing out. Same goes for the red stamp that was added a few months later. That is important with peace, but not really anything else. It can have many different numbers. You don't need to worry about what the number is. That is a stamp that is on the inside of the Gen 6 Tush tag, will not be on any previous generations, will not be on Gen 7, and it's only on the Chinese ones, not the Indonesian ones. The tie ink distinction here is referring to the capitalization on the back of the Tush tag next to the copyright year. Only matters with peace in some cases, not important otherwise. And starting with Gen 7, we had an intentional split where there were 2 different Tush tag versions being made at once, with the Gen 6 being used for the older designs with a copyright of 93 to 98, and the Gen 7 with a copyright of 99, the new releases. That would remain consistent for the rest of that year. None of the Gen 6s would ever upgrade to the 7. And then around the last quarter of the year, we have the Gen 8 the Gen 8 Tush tag, which is basically the Gen 7, but it's double-sided instead of a loop, and not all beanies did update to that one either. Once again, new releases would get it, and some of the older ones updated, but not all. It was kind of inconsistent. Only other thing really worth mentioning here is the very bottom where it mentions if a beanie was made in Korea, China, or Indonesia. Those just indicate the windows in which those different countries were producing beanies. China is definitely the most common of the 3. Korean ones can sell for more. Indonesian ones usually not as much, unless they also have the Canadian tag, and that can boost their value. I believe that basically covers it, so we can get back to the video though. So, I'll try not to spend too long dwelling on everything, but it's probably going to happen a little bit. Go ahead and change the lighting here a little bit. So, I mentioned these in the unboxing video. These are some of the original 9. I don't have all 9 of them, but yeah, like I said, we're going to kind of be... I have to assume that some people watching this are not going to have seen my other stuff, so I'm going to have to kind of recover some information. Original 9 can refer to a few different things. At its most basic definition, it's just the 9 beanies that were first released. You've got these 4, which are Spot, Cubby, or Brownie. I'll explain that in a minute. Patty, Chocolate. There's also Flash, Splash, Legs, Squealer, and Pinchers are the other ones. But in a more specific definition, it's referring to the actual first edition versions of those. And the way that you can tell if you have the first edition is through the Tush tag. So of the 4 here, Chocolate is the least interesting of them. And again, showed this in the previous video, but if we look at the Tush tag on here, you'll see it only has 4 lines of information on each side. And it says made in Korea. And that is an indication that this is a true original, which was released sometime between January 1994 and probably sometime around April or May, if I had to guess. It's hard to say for certain. And to contrast, I will I have to get my other patty anyway. So here is a Gen 1 Tush tag that is not the 4-line version. I can get that in focus here. We're going to be looking more at Patty in a second here, but yeah. So here's the 2 side by side. Let me actually get the Patty up. So yeah, pretty much the same design on this. It's just white with black text, nothing special, no kind of logos or anything. But the difference is the original version has the 4 lines and the later one has 5. So that's how you can tell these are original 9s. Only the first 9 beanies can have that, and a couple slight variations of them. So I guess that would probably make sense to explain what those variations are. I don't have all of them. Well, actually, no, I kind of do. It's a little hard to tell. So we'll save Patty for a minute. I've talked about this one at length before. Cubby/Brownie is a little more easy to explain, but because this one doesn't have the hang tag attached, we can't really tell for certain what this one was. But as you can see, it's got the 4-line tag. And so this is an original version of this bear. It's just that when it first came out, this and Patty both released at the same time at it was the Gatlinburg Toy Fair in November of 1993. It was when beanies were first revealed to the public. They had all of the original 9 available to look at, but only these 2 were available for purchase. The rest hadn't been mass produced yet. And so that was the only place you could get them. If you went to the toy fair and you owned a store or whatever and you were interested in selling them at your store, you could fill out an order form and have the original shipment sent out. And Brownie and Deep Fuchsia Patty were also sent to stores in that first wave. Basically then, after that first wave, when more stores started picking them up, which was January of 94, this original Deep Fuchsia version of Patty had already switched colors to raspberry, and this is not actually a raspberry. This is technically a magenta, but it's a very similar color, so I'm just going to put it there for reference. Let me get my... I've got this huge pile of beanies over on the bed I'm using for reference here. I got them all prepared ahead of time. Yeah, like I said, I'll talk more about Patty in a second because that one's a little more complicated. But with this one, it's pretty much just when it was at the toy fair, it was Brownie. When it got released in a more like, I don't even want to say mass release, because in the beginning, like, beanies were not. They didn't just burst into existence everywhere. Like, it was a very slow trickle with like a few stores that were interested here and there, and it took a few years to really get the ball rolling. So, from what I've heard, it was mostly the Great Lakes states, Texas and New Jersey, I believe, were the ones that kind of had like the first gen ones. When this one was getting released at that point, they did change the name to Cubby, but it was inconsistent. So Cubby and Brownie did actually coexist for a while, up until the switch to the 5-line tag, and then Brownie dropped off. So basically, if you have a 4-line tag, that means it might be a Brownie, but you don't actually know that for sure. It's definitely an original 9 either way, but it's either a Brownie or a Cubby. You can't really tell because the name is the only thing that makes it stand apart. And just to get this one out of the way before we talk about the Patty versions, Spot is a lot simpler. Where is my Spot for comparison? I know I brought it out somewhere. Here it is. So yeah, the original Spot did not have a spot on the back. And then it did. That's pretty much it. So this one changed allegedly April of '94. I'm pretty sure it was after that. It was probably sometime around like September, October, if I had to guess, because the spotless version survived into the Gen 2 hang tag window, and I've had to do a lot of kind of detective work and piecing stuff together, and just kind of comparing dates to figure out how this timeline all fits together. So it's not an exact science. I'm also pretty sure that the Gen 1 and 2 tags did coexist for a pretty decent amount of time, but it doesn't really make sense for this one to have changed as early as April, especially since apparently with the Gen 2 tag, the spotless version is actually still the more common of the two. So this one probably survived for longer than the records say it did. But either way, that's pretty much all we need to know about that one. Put these aside. So with Patty, like I said, I know I've talked about this one before, but we'll give the lowdown again. So there's 4 versions of Patty. I only have 3 of them. Basically, you have, if we'll put a gap for the one I don't have here. There's deep fuchsia, raspberry, magenta, and fuchsia. And part of the confusion with this is the fact that these 2 colors are nearly identical, and the 2 colors, including the one I don't have, are also nearly identical. But also the naming is confusing because some sources, such as here, will list them as magenta and maroon, and in this case, the one that they say is magenta is actually referring to these, even though this one is called magenta by the community, and then this one is referred to as maroon, and that would be applying to these 2. So it's, like I said, it's really confusing, but we're going to ignore what the official sources name them as, because that's not what we go by. So how do you tell the difference between these? Well, the middle one is easier to tell because it's more of a reddish color, obviously. Sometimes in photos it can be hard to tell. If I play with the saturation here a bit, it'll probably, this is like freaking black and white, but like I said, it kind of just depends on the quality of the photo, the brightness, a lot of different stuff like that. It's definitely very noticeable in person. But anyway, the history on these is basically, this one, as I explained it, was the original. And this one can only ever have that 4-line tag, never anything else. When it got released to stores after that very first wave, that was when they made the raspberry one, which is basically this, but very slightly bluer. I wish I had it for comparison. I'll edit in a photo, but like I said, it's really similar to this one. So you can basically consider it like it went from the purple to the red, and then that one can also have the 4-line tag, but because it's a significantly different color, you can definitely tell the difference there. Then that was with Gen 1 hang tag still. Then around the time that it changed from Gen 2 to Gen 3, some people will say exactly when it switched. It's probably a little more fluid than that. I'm sure there was a little spillover. It changed from the raspberry to the magenta. It's such a slight color change that I personally believe it was probably just more of like a slight change in the dye that they used, and it wasn't like an intentional decision. But either way, they are tracked separately. The magenta one apparently has more of a, like, the beak shape changes a little bit between these. From what I've heard, it's a little more consistent with like the magenta one kind of having this kind of more squarish with a tuck, whereas the raspberry is kind of the more rounded, I think. Like I said, I'm explaining all this stuff because I want to, but it's like, this is not going to help anybody. If you ever have one of these and you don't know how to, like, you're going to probably need help identifying it, so you would just go to an expert. But that's just, I'm kind of explaining it just for the sake of it. Anyway, that's how those two worked, basically. And then this one eventually changed to the fuchsia. Sources vary on that one as well. I've seen, what does the booklet say? I think it's 228.95. Yeah, that's what they say. It was probably more around June. But either way, it switched back to this one. And then, so that at that point, we were at the Gen 3 hang tag, Gen 1 Tush. And so if it has no tag attached to it, like if it has no tag at all, then you're just kind of out of luck and you would just assume it's the more common one. If it has the Tush tag, then that's where the 4-line version comes in, because by the time it would have switched to this, it had been out for like a year and a half. They're definitely into the 5-line version now. So it's like, how do you tell these two apart? Well, it's certainly not going to be by color, because they're just about as close as they can possibly be. Like, let me get some contrast up on this and see if it's even remotely visible. Not really. Like, that is really hard to tell. It's like there is the tiniest little difference there, but you would never know just from looking at it. So basically, 4-line tag, it's a deep fuchsia, it's an original, worth lots of money. This one without a tag cost me $100, and honestly that was still pretty low for it. The more common one, it's like if it has the original Gen 3 hang tag and it's in mint condition, it'll still be worth a bit, but it's nowhere near as rare as the original one, and so those are going to be just, yeah, those are a lot less special. And if it has a Gen 4 tag or a 5, then it's like $5 or less. So let's finally shut up about Patty, and I'll grab down my next ones. So like I said, I'm going through these chronologically, and these are the first beanies to like really properly retire. These two, along with Humphrey, which I don't have, unfortunately. I have the Buddy. The Buddy doesn't count, but I'll put it here anyway just for reference, I guess. What does the tag say about this one? Let me zoom in. Yeah, Humphrey the Beanie Baby was one of the first to be retired, very few were produced, making him highly collectible. That's pretty much the long and short of it. Like I said, I don't want to have every explanation for these to just be, it is old and rare and that makes it special, so just trust me. It's like, I want to give a little bit more than that, but sometimes there's really not much else to say. So these three were, again, pretending for a minute that this is the original Humphrey and not the Buddy that came out much later on. So I'll just put it aside. But those three were the first like designs to be properly retired and not just changed from one like version to another, like we had with Patty and Spot and a few other ones that I don't have. I guess I'll mention those. There was Wingless Quackers changed to having wings, January of 95. I don't have that one. Same time as all of the old face teddies changing to the new face teddies. I don't have any of those. Tan Inky without a mouth gained a mouth sometime around August of 94. Really minor change, but it is something. I think those are actually the only other ones. If I think of any, I'll mention them later. But yeah, so Trap and Slither, which I wish mine had the tongue. It got cut off or just pulled apart at some point. I've thought about just getting a piece of red felt and cutting it into the shape of the tongue and just kind of like stitching it onto this, just for display purposes pretty much. But yeah, Humphrey, Slither, and Trap retired in June of 1995, and so they are definitely among the rarest beanies just at face value. It's not the type of thing where you have to say like, oh, well, this one is this particular color or this version or has this name on the tag. It's like, no, if you have these, you're good. Of course, with any of these, it's like, if you have the Gen 1 tag, it's going to be worth more than the Gen 2, which is worth more than the Gen 3, because they can be any of those. But even the Gen 3 version's worth quite a bit. This Trap's one of my favorite beanies. I always really loved this one when I first saw it in like old magazines, and of course at that point it was already retired and worth like over $1,000 back in 1997. So I always wanted one of these, and I'm glad that I finally got it. It is very small, and mine, like I said, this one has no tags. Even the Tush tag's been cut off. It's very worn down, well loved by the previous owner. And this one I think I got for like $25-30, and that's considering all of the damage it's taken, and that's still a pretty good deal. The Slither with the cut off tongue and everything I think was worth more than that. I'll probably edit in the prices on this that I spent. But yeah, pretty cool beanies to have. Not really a whole lot else to say to them. It's just you don't see these very often. They're always a pleasant thing to find when they show up online. So I'll keep those off to the side, put Humphrey back. Now at the same time that those changed, and probably the same time that Patty changed from the magenta to the fuchsia, there were a few other color changes. So we have these three. We've got the Tan Inky with a mouth. I mentioned before it was originally made with no mouth on it. That changed sometime around August of 94. But yeah, so this is the Tan Inky. It's honestly, it's not even really tan. It's like a gray. It's not the same gray as some other ones, but like, what would you call this? Like mauve taupe, something like that. We got that one. We've got the gray Happy the Hippo. I'll be showing the tag in detail in a second here, because all my other old ones don't have hang tags, so that's one we can actually look at. And then the orange version of Digger the Crab. Let me put up the more common versions of these for comparison. So there's the Red Digger with my, I actually turned my contrast up to try to make the colors a little brighter in this, so they're almost kind of similar looking with the way the camera looks right now. It's, yeah, that shows it definitely a lot more clearly. But I'll put that back up just because I think it looks better with the deeper colors. So yeah, we've got those. Then I have Happy changed from gray to lavender, or lilac sometimes it's called. And then Inky changed from tan, or whatever we're calling that, to pink. So the pink Inky, the lavender Happy, and the Red Digger, not particularly special beanies. If you've got them with a Gen 3 tag, then great, they're going to be worth more than usual, but if they're Gen 4s, not really anything too special. These three fall into the exact same boat as Humphrey, Slither, and Trap. They retired, or it's like retired or changed designs. The terminology is like either way. They changed in June of 1995, which was Gen 3 hang tag, Gen 1 tush, and older the tag, more they're worth. But yeah, either way, no matter what tag they've got, they're going to be worth something. So let's just take a look at the tag on this one, just for the heck of it. It's not in very good shape. You'll see the inside is pretty bad. Let's get some focus on here. So yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot more Gen 3s from the outside, so the front of this is nothing too special. The back of it, there's a few different versions of the Gen 3 hang tag, and you'll see how this one differs from the others when I bring out another one later. This is the original North American Gen 3, where it has the retain tag for reference and diagonals on the bottom, and then nothing written above the UPC. We'll see how that changes later. Then the inside has got marker all over it, but ignoring that, what we've got on this one is what I usually just call the safety information on the left side, and on the right it's got the to, from, with love. This version of the tag is only on the, I hesitate to use the word original, but it's only on the older Gen 3s. If we look at how everything works on the timeline, June of 95, which was when all of these ones retired, there were like 24 new releases, and those will have, like on the tush tag here, this one says copyright 1993. That year does not actually indicate when it was specifically made. Let me go ahead and just write down another one here for comparison. Like, it'll say that no matter when it came out. Like, for instance, the Spot with a Spot, which is, this one's a way later release. It's got the Gen 4 tag. We look at it, it's still going to say 1993 on it. You cannot use that as a measure for when it came out. But anyway, like I said, it's just going to be consistent for every release of that same beanie. But yeah, the ones that say 93 are the only ones, as far as I'm aware, that can have this style of tag. If they're a later one, like this, which I'll talk about more in a second, that have the 95 tag, then they would always have the later version. But I've heard that sometimes the 95 copyrights can still have that older diagonal, like, backside tag. I don't know if that's correct. I'm not enough of an expert on these older beanies to really say for sure, but something to look out for. And there's also another one that's the German tag, which I'll have to put a picture of. That one will say, I think it's like Importeur Teil Deutschland on the back, and then the to, from, with love will be in italic font. That's how that one stands out. Those are very rare. There's also a few versions of the Gen 2 tag and the Gen 1, but we'll talk more about those in an eventual tag generation video. So anyway, I brought this one out, so let's talk about it. This is tie-dyed Lizzy. Here is what the more common Lizzy looks like. It's usually just called blue Lizzy. It's blue, black spots with a spotted yellow and orange belly. Same kind of story with these as with the last ones. It's just this was the original version, and then it changed later on, except this one came out in June of 95, and then 6 months later, January of 96, it changed to the blue version. And so this one's pretty cool. This was one of the first tie-dyed beanies. It came out at the same time as the Dinosaur Trio and possibly Coral the Fish. That one's debatable. It might have come a little bit later. And for a long time, I thought that the tie-dyed Lizzy would always have the same type of fabric as Rex, which is like mostly red with kind of a little bit of yellow or blue sometimes mixed in, but not true. Lizzy can be all sorts of different colors. I've actually seen some pretty nice kind of lighter colored, like really full spectrum, like you got some good reds and greens and blues and all that stuff. This one's not bad. Got some brown on it, which is usually not desirable, but I think it looks nice. I'm glad that I picked this one up. yeah, tie-dye Lizzy, pretty cool. It's sometimes cited as being like really high up there in terms of rarity, like almost up with your royal blue peanut type of stuff. It's not quite that rare though. Arguably more so than like the orange digger gray happy tan inky, just because it had a shorter run time. It was only 6 months, whereas these were out for longer. But because these did also retire earlier, you have to take that into consideration. It's a lot of stuff to keep track of. We don't know any actual numbers on these. All you can really say is how many appear on the market and how much people are willing to spend on them. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. So let me put these away and go grab some more stuff. Okay, here's some more unique ones. Unique just meaning, oh, gonna have to reattach that later. Tag protector fell off. But yeah, basically things that aren't just old variants. These are just genuinely old beanies. I can barely even see this one on the left here. I'll have to show that one off closer. But yeah, this is Chili, Peking, and Webb. And as we can see right off the bat here, Chili and Peking, exact same style as Cubby, which I've still got sitting over here, so I'll put that there just for comparison. And also Blackie, which I have in the other room and I just don't feel like getting. But yeah, we got Chili the polar bear, Peking the panda, and then Webb the spider. Got a red underside. Just put that one on top so you can kind of see it a little better against the black table. Not really a whole lot to say about these three specifically. They're older beanies that aren't around anymore. Well, I mean, technically none of them are, but you know what I mean. They weren't around when beanies got popular. Because these three retired in January of '96, and they have the exact same tags as those last ones I said. The latest release of them will have the Gen 3 hang tag and the 5-line Gen 1 Tush tag. I wish I had more to say about these. I would tell stories about how I got them, but most of them are just I found them on eBay, or I found them from somebody on the Facebook group and I bought them. That's pretty much the whole story. Peking, I'll mention that counterfeits often get the shape of the like eye patch wrong. Most of the bears will also kind of have like a more elongated nose. There's a lot of little stuff you have to look out for, and if you don't know what you're doing, it's usually best to buy authenticated. I'm definitely not an expert on it either. It's just eventually kind of get a sense of that looks off. But the reason I pointed out the eye patches is because as with anything, these are subject to human error. They're not all going to be 100% exactly the same. And so I've seen ones that looked perfectly fine, but then people would mention, like, oh, the eye shape looks off. Is this one a fake? And I'm like, I don't think it is, but I mean, I'm not the person to ask. So there's a lot of stuff to keep into consideration. That's basically all I mean. Chili I showed off in an older video from a few years ago, actually. This one I just got lucky enough to find at a Goodwill. It's the only like really old beanie like this that I've found like that, and it's in really bad shape. You can't really tell from looking. Like you probably can a little bit, but like the fabric, yeah, it's a lot dirtier. It's just kind of more like worn. I don't know what else you'd call that. Sitting on a dirty rack for a while and probably played with by whoever owned it before for a long time, and so it's a little bit beat up, but that is fine by me. I want these to have them. I don't want them to resell them, so if I can get them in good shape I will, but I'm not gonna pay a ton of money for that. Wish I had more to say about Webb. Webb's pretty cool, but not too terribly interesting, I guess. So, like I said, those were January of '96. That was the same time that Lizzy changed, and it was also the same time that we lost the majority of the teddies. So, let me bring them out. I don't have all 6 of them, and this one is only here for comparison because this is a Gen 4. This one's nothing special. But let me grab the magazine. Hold on. So, with very few exceptions, I think the only one that I've shown off so far that was not originally released as a Gen 1 was the Lizzy. And the teddies are no different than that. Basically, they were originally released as what we call the old faces. I don't have any of these. 6 different colors. You've got brown, cranberry, jade, magenta, teal, violet, and all 6 of them, like I said, they were released simultaneously. All of them are just named Teddy. The color is nowhere on the tag. That's just kind of what they're referred to internally by the company and what the collectors call them. And then those were out for about 6 months, from June of 94 to January of 95. And then they changed to the new face teddies, which are same 6 colors. These have ribbons now, and as you can tell, the faces are totally different. They switched from these kind of triangular ones to the rounder ones that are used on all the bears now. These can be Gen 1 or 2. These can be Gen 2 or 3, except for the brown one, which can also be Gen 4. Brown is by far the most common one. But yet, the old face brown is actually the rarest of the old faces for whatever reason. So, we'll put this one aside. But yeah, as for these 3, I've got the cranberry, the jade, and the violet. They sure are just bears of different colors. I can't really think of much else to say about them. Oh no, actually, there's a few things. So, with all the teddies, this applies to both the old face and the new face versions. As I mentioned, the tag only says Teddy on it. It doesn't have a color, but they do all have different style numbers. And so I'll show off the tag on the brown one here. What I mean by style number is on all the tags that are Gen 4 or older, it'll have a number on it. This one, literally right after the name, says style 4050. And that will also match the same last 4 digits on the barcode here. That's just kind of Ty's internal way of like taking stock of everything. It shows up on all the order forms and that kind of thing. But even though all 6 of the teddies had a different style number, they were all kind of released with like no care put into matching those, except for the brown one. I don't know why the brown one's different. I have theories. I have a feeling it's because this was a more generic color that shared with other beanies, whereas these were unique and might have been made in their own factories or something. I don't know, but either way, you can get a cranberry with a jade's number, basically, or any other combination except the brown. The brown is always going to be consistent. And when you have that, it doesn't really mean anything for its value. Definitely doesn't mean that it's a fake or anything, or that it was the tag was switched out. That just kind of happened. And the other thing I can say about these is on my cranberry and jade, I'll do the jade because this. I'm looking at it on the camera. This thing looks like almost black. It is more noticeable in real life. Let me brighten that up a bit. Yeah. It really is just kind of a dark green. Can we get any better look at that? I'm not sure why that's not showing up right. There's something with the camera. But anyway, I think I like the brighter color more. I'll switch it back later if it's too much. But yeah, with my cranberry and my jade, the ribbons on them can't be moved at all. With pretty much all the other bears, like there's some exceptions with later releases and stuff, but with stuff like the brown teddy, Valentino, that kind of thing, they have like the ribbon is just kind of tied around it. Like you can slide it around. You can. It's not sewn in or anything, but on these 2 they are. And that was also inconsistent. Some of them have it sewn in, some of them don't. And once again, no kind of impact on the value or anything like that. It's just some of them were made different ways. My violet is a different story. This one is just going to be me rambling about how I obtained this one, because I've got a story here. these two I'll just mention right off the bat. I got really good deal on these. I don't remember how much I paid for them together, but I definitely got them for pretty cheap. I found a teal one online yesterday that I'm like debating if I want to buy. It's just at the border where I want to get it, but I don't know if I should. But either way, the violet one, I've got a real unique story behind this one. So I've mentioned in other videos that there's, I have my own Beanie subreddit, and then there's also another one that it was just kind of, I don't know who owned it originally, but they kind of gave up on it, and it was just kind of without an owner for a while, and then someone else picked it up. They saw that I had my own subreddit, and they're like, hey, do you want to switch over to this one? We can kind of run it together. And I never responded just because of like conflict of interest with the Facebook group, and they didn't really approve of the way that this guy handles things. So I just kind of didn't respond, and then he got really mad and blocked me from the group. And so I still kind of lurk there, and it's mostly just to see if people post interesting stuff. If they have questions that aren't getting answered, I'll sometimes PM them, but only if it's like something that I know and the owner doesn't, which doesn't happen very often. He usually knows his stuff. But there was one person who had this, they picked it up from a thrift store, I think, and they were just kind of like, hey, what is this? It's got like older style tag on it. Is this worth anything? And this was where my knowledge kind of was able to help out a bit, because I don't think the owner of the group knew this. The New Face Violet Teddy is a weird case. It's I've got the booklet here. I'm trying to show it off. Yeah, I'm not gonna fix the contrast here, but basically we've got Teddy Violet New Face, and then it says Teddy Violet with green ribbon Employee Appreciation Day, and then red ribbon, same thing. These two are now referred to as just Employee Bear. The reason they don't really have an official name is because they were made without hang tags. They were a employee exclusive, about 150 each of the green and red. And those beanies just are this exact beanie, except some of them have a red ribbon instead of green. And they don't have the Gen 1 Tush tag, they have the Gen 2. Otherwise, they're identical. Also, the date on the Tush can either be 93 or 95 for some reason. I think that they were probably made just with leftover crap they had hanging around at the factories. And they're like, we'll just kind of throw this together. There was very little thought put into it. But anyway, not seeing the tag, if you just see this sitting there, you can't tell which it is. So I was like, hey, which type of Tush tag does it have? Can you send me pictures? Because you might have something like really, really rare, but even if you don't, you still have one that's pretty good. And so he sent me the pictures, and it was this, which is the less special of the two, but, you know, still really nice find, and I needed it. So I was like, I'd be willing to buy this. How much did you want to sell it for? And he's like, well, I don't know what it's worth. And so I looked up the price guide, and I was honest. I'm like, they usually sell in this range. Because this one's beat up, there's a stain on the tag, I could do 40, and he was fine with that. So I'm like, all right, cool, let's set this up, give you my info and everything. I'll need your PayPal. He's like, well, I don't want to use PayPal. I'd rather just have you send me cash. And so I'm just like, no, people don't do that. You can't, you're not supposed to really send cash through the mail. And he's like, well, that's how I've always done it. I'd feel better if you sent me cold hard cash. He kept saying the phrase cold hard cash. And I'm just like, well, I don't want to do that because, like, it's not secure. Like, if I send you the money, how do I know you're going to send me the beanie? Like, you could rip me off. And he's like, well, I wouldn't. He's like, well, I would never do that. I'm just like, okay, well, think of it from your perspective. What if you sent it to me? Like, what if you sent me the beanie and then I didn't send you the money? Like, you would have no way of knowing for sure I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain. Like, that's just kind of how buying things works. He's like, oh, well, if you did that, I'd just call the cops. You have your address now. And I'm like, dude, come on. So eventually he gives in. I send him the money through PayPal. And I put in a little extra to do the, to cover the shipping. And also PayPal has like like an insurance type of thing. Where it's like, it charges the person getting the money. So like, I don't need to explain it. But basically, yeah, I put in a little extra. And so then he's like, okay, cool, I'll send it out soon. And then like the next day, he gives me a tracking number. And normally a tracking number is like 20 digits long. And the one he gave me, it was like 7 digits. So I'm like, what the crap is this? I put it into the tracker and surprisingly, it doesn't work. So I message him, I'm like, so what was that number you gave me? That does, like, this was USPS? Because this number doesn't work. He's like, yeah, that's the number I put into PayPal. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, when I finished it up, like, you know, they asked me to put in the tracking number and everything, and so I just put in that number. I'm like, is that the number they gave you from, like, that was on the receipt? And he goes, what receipt? I'm like, the receipt from the post office when you mailed it. He's like, no, I didn't get a receipt. So I asked, where did you get the number from? He's like, well, I put it into the thing. So you made it up, basically. He's like, yeah, they asked for a number. I put in a number. I'm like, oh my God, dude. Okay, you don't make up a number. This is a number that they give you. He's like, well, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. I sent my thing. If you don't trust me, and like, he's making this big stupid deal out of it. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll find out. If it doesn't show up in like a couple weeks, then I mean, I did the insurance. I can get my money back. But okay. He's like, no, I'll fix it. So he like puts in another fake number, and he does this like 5 times. He keeps just putting in these numbers that he's just mashing random keys and submitting it through PayPal. And so I just keep getting all these emails like, here's your news tracking number. I'm like, yeah, that's not correct. So I just ignore it for a while. I'm like, whatever. I hope I still get it, but if I don't, I'll get my money back. Amazingly, this thing does arrive in the mail a few days later. And so I message him. I'm like, hey, I got the beanie. I guess we're done here. And this thing comes, it's in horrible condition. It's got like this brown stain on it, like all over. I had to wipe off with a shot wipe. And also the ribbon was untied. And I've never had to tie a ribbon like this before, so I had to like look up how to do it. And I struggled with this stupid ribbon for like probably 40 minutes, but that's a whole other story on its own. Just trying to make it look like the way it's supposed to be tied. So I'm like, whatever, this is all finished. But then he messages me again. He's like, man, you trying to rip me off here? I'm gonna call the police. I'm like, what did I do? What are you complaining about now? He goes, well, I just, like, they locked my PayPal account, and they won't let me pull my money out of it because they said that there was suspicious activity, which means that you did something. I'm like, no, it's probably because you put in like 6 fake tracking numbers. That wasn't me. And so I basically had to battle with this guy for like 2 months. And what would keep happening is like, I'd be like, I'm not dealing with this. I didn't do anything wrong. If you think I did, then like, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. I sent the money. I looked at my bank statement. It definitely, like, it's been taken out of my account. Not my fault. And then he'd be like, okay, I'm so sorry I put you through all this, and we'll get it sorted out. And then like 3 days later, he'll be like, you still scamming me. Like, it was an ongoing issue for so long, but it finally went away. It was such a stupid thing that happened. I've never dealt with anybody like that before. It was amazing. So, let's move on to the next batch here. So, let's look at some cats. And let me actually grab the common versions of these as well. So, we got lots of cats. So on the left we have Nip. on the right we have Zip, and they each have 3 different versions, and we're going to just kind of look at these one at a time. So Nip is my preferred of the two. I personally think that this old version of Nip is adorable. Zip is pretty much the same, but I just like the color on Nip better. But anyway, so the story with these is these were not original Gen 1s. With Gen 1s you have the original 9, and then there were 25 released later. A bunch of them, of course, changed designs and stuff, but in terms of just like, you know, unique beanies, that's how many there were. Gen 2 was mostly just Gen 1s that updated tags, but there were a couple new ones. Nip and Zip were 2 of them, and the other one was Valentino. And so they were released in this style, which is called the white face version. Of course, they've also got the white belly, which is not on the later ones. But yeah, this is white face Nip and white face Zip. So these were released January of 95, and sources will say that they changed in January of 96, same time as like Lizzy and those other ones that just retired that I told you about before. I think they were probably a little earlier than that. I just find that hard to prove. I'll explain why in a minute. But yeah, so yeah, that's really mostly all there is to say about these two. But if you look really close, you'll also notice that, let me actually do a closer focus on here. The whisker colors on these is a little different. And it's not because they're different. Like, it's not because, like, Nip has one, Zip has the other. That was just something that changed over time. And so this color is kind of like it's the hot pink, but it's usually referred to as magenta whisker. And then this is just the light pink one. The original Gen 2 releases will have the magenta whiskers, and then the Gen 3s will usually have the light pink. I think some of the really early ones can also have the magenta. But basically, this is the original, this is rarer, usually on Gen 2s. This one's a little more common. It's a very minor detail that you usually won't see listed on like websites that have all the beanies and all the variants and stuff, because it's such a small thing. It was never really tracked that closely. Price guide, from what I have seen, does usually, like, the price guide, like, it had, how do I word this? If it has no hang tag, you can't tell what generation it is, because it's like, with this one, it could be 1, 2, or 3. With this particular beanie, it can't be 1, but it would be 1, 2, or 3. You don't know which. But it'll basically say that a tagless Gen 2 is worth more than tagless Gen 3, and they use the whisker color to differentiate those. So that's how those are. And then these are the middle versions, and these are actually rarer than the white faces. These are just called all gold Nip and all black Zip. That's how they're typically referred to. I usually call them solid color, just so I don't have to say the whole thing. It's like, it goes from white face to solid to white paw. So yeah, these totally different type of head. And then the inside of the ears are pink, the whiskers are still pink, and then the rest of the body is all just one color. And then I'll get back to these in a second. The final versions changed up a couple things. The inner ears and the whiskers became white, and then the paws became white. And so they mostly just kind of changed side by side. Nip and Zip, like the white paw versions, were continued long into the later tags, so these are generally going to be common. Nip retired end of 97, and Zip retired May of 98, so this one was around slightly longer. But as far as the rarity on these goes, as I mentioned, these two are considered the rarest and will sell for the highest typically. Like, assuming mint condition on everything, these are going to sell for more. And that's just because they had a really small release window. The official sources claim that these were from January of 96 to March of 96. As I mentioned before, I think it was a little bit later. And then, of course, these replaced them right after. The reason I think it's later is because these two will always have a Gen 1 Tush tag. These two will always have a Gen 1 Tush tag. These two can have a Gen 1, but it's extremely rare for them to. Most of the time, they'll be a Gen 2, and then onwards for the later releases, basically. And judging from other Beanie release dates, the January 96 releases include a lot of things like just like Bucky, Ears, Ringo, Twigs. There's like 14 of them, and most of them are only Gen 2 Tush. There's a couple that were released originally with a Gen 1. If they change from this version to this as late as March, and then these still had the Gen 1, that doesn't quite line up with the timeline. So I'm thinking it was probably a few months earlier. That's just me getting nitpicky. Like, whenever I talk about the timeline, it's never anything that really matters that much. Like, it's basically just me policing, like, wanting to know this exact stuff just for personal records, but it's like, of course, it's not gonna matter too much to the average collector. But I just like to point that stuff out because I find it interesting, at least. I don't know. I'll shut up about these. But yeah, I like these old face ones. I think these are cute. Probably my favorite cat beanies. So that clears out my top shelf. I've got someone sitting up there that I just put back because they were taking up space. My very top shelf, I can't really stretch the camera very far. Let me zoom in. I'm not going to take these down because they're not super interesting, but these are my common Gen 3s, except for the fake number 1 bear that you can see sitting there. I showed that in the unboxing video. But yeah, I've got, from left to right, we got Waddle, Legs, Twigs, Spot with a Spot, Ziggy, Fuchsia Patty, Pinchers, Tusk, Squealer, Ringo, Manny, Lavender Happy, Speedy, and Chops. Those are all common Gen 3s because they basically still kept being made when they switched to the Gen 4 tag. And that is an important distinction to make because as much as I like to focus on the timeline, that is a very important factor in what makes a beanie worth a lot. But there is a little more that goes into it, and desirability is a big part. And if a beanie was only available with older tags, like Slither, Trap, that kind of stuff, then they're going to be more sought after by collectors, because if you want to have one of everything, it's like you could fork out the money for like a Gen 1 Blackie, which is going to cost you well over $1,000, or you could buy a Gen 4 or 5 Blackie for $3. And yes, the older ones with the older, like the ones with the older tags, are a lot rarer, and so to a lot of collectors, like if you really like to get the best of the best, then you're gonna get that. But if you just want to have one of each type of animal, or like one of each design, you don't have to worry about that as much. But if it's something that did retire early, more people are going to be interested in those, and so that's why those are always going to sell for more. So when you have right here, this is my Gen 3 Ziggy. It's got the Gen 1 Tush tag. Like, this one is kind of a rare find, but it's not going to be worth as much as a tie-dye Lizzy or a Humphrey or something like that, because Ziggy is available with a later tag, and those aren't. That's pretty much all there is to that. So, moving on to my next shelf here. Get this one out of the way before I start taking down the ones that are in cases. Let's go over Mystic. Let's go over Mystic. Let's go over Mystic. And I'm going to turn that gain down a bit, or exposure or whatever, so you can see these a little better. So yeah, there's 4 versions of Mystic, and I will explain the history of these here. But they are from left to right. fine mane with tan horn, coarse mane with tan horn, coarse mane with iridescent horn, rainbow mane with iridescent horn. For the sake of brevity, I usually like to say shiny instead of iridescent, but either way. So, we'll look at the two shiny horn ones in a minute. Let's look at these and what makes them different. So, the fine mane basically is a much thinner, stringier type of yarn than the coarse mane. If you see them side to side, the difference is pretty clear. And if you are not sure, then the easiest way to tell is to look at the tail and see how many threads are in it. So basically on the coarse mane one, you're usually going to have about 8 or 9 strands. On this one, it'll be more like 15 to 20. So that's the distinction there. The fine mane version was a Gen 1 originally. Let me get that focus a little different here. Yeah, released as a Gen 1 in the second batch of those, which was June of 94. And one of the more valuable Gen 1s just because it's white and hard to keep clean, and it's just kind of a more desirable beanie in general. And it stayed that way until about Jan of 96. It's hard to say for sure. This one's not tracked in like the checklists or that kind of stuff made by Ty. And the reason I think it's that way is because this version can have a Gen 2 Tush tag, as we see with mine. This is our first time seeing one on camera, so I'll just kind of show it a little more closely, I guess. This one's not in the greatest shape. It had like a piece of tape on it. Actually, yeah, it still does. But yeah, big fat tie heart with no name underneath. Wider than the, it's wider than the later tags. Not by a whole lot, but by a little. But basically, the fine mane and the coarse mane they kind of coexisted for a while, as far as I can tell, because within the Gen 3 hang tag window, either one of these can be a Gen 1 or Gen 2 Tush. And so, when we're talking about Gen 3 specifically, this one's going to be worth more. And then, this one will still have some value if it's a Gen 1, or I'm sorry, if it's a Gen 3, but not nearly as much. And that's the only other one that will ever have value. There's a lot of misinformation about Mystic, and people who don't know the different versions will often claim that this one is worth a lot, and it never is. Unless you've got that original version, of course. And so, basically with these later ones, like price-wise, there's essentially no difference between these. They all sell for about 5 or less usually. But as we can see, the difference is pretty obvious between these two. Uses this shiny material with a light pink stitching on it. There are versions of this that apparently have kind of a brown thread instead of the pink. I don't actually have one of those. It's not tracked as a separate version anywhere. It's just kind of like a little oddity that can show up sometimes. But yeah, this change happened in October of 97, which was towards the end of the lifespan of the Gen 4 tag. And then this one was basically around for a little over a year and switched to this version in January 99 or December 98, one of the two. Basically right around the change to the new year. And of course the difference here is with the fabric, or not the fabric, but like the material they used for the mane and the tail, because these are very fluffy and kind of rainbow colored instead of solid white. So this is, I would say this is definitely the most appealing version. It's the most interesting to look at, but not really worth any more than this version, which is not really worth any more than this version. But this version is also not really worth any more than this. They're all just kind of the same. So the only time they ever really care about these is with the original Fine Man. And for comparison, let's look at Derby. Well, let's move these back. And let's look at Derby. And let's look at Derby. Now, I don't have this one. There is also a Fine Mane Derby. And I'll explain that one in a minute. But here we have coarse mane with no star. Star is referring to the white diamond on the forehead. I think that's just a term used for horses. This is coarse mane with a star, and this is furry mane with a star. Basically, same story with these, except the difference is the fine mane derby was not a Gen 1 originally. It released a lot later. It came out in June of 95, and it changed very shortly after. Like, we're talking maybe like 2-3 months. Same story as Mystic. It has about 15-20-ish threads in the tail, comparable amount as this one in the mane. Just very thin, wispy fabric, or wispy threads, basically. I don't know what you'd call it. Just string, thread, yarn, whatever. And then it changed to the coarse mane. And so then we basically have the same story with these, where it's like, if you've got this one as a Gen 3, then sure, it's going to be worth a few bucks, but nowhere near as much as the fine mane. Fine mane derby is actually considered one of the rarest beanies ever. It's rarer than Royal Blue Peanut, which is, of course, one that I haven't shown because I don't own it. It's Royal Blue Peanut's the most famous because it's very distinct, and it kind of has this legacy of being like, oh, it was only around for a couple months and like very few were ever made, and Ty kind of latched onto that and made it like the mascot of rare beanies. They made it one of the original buddies that came out. They made a teenie based off of it in the 2000 promotion. But yeah, fine mane derby is actually rarer and usually more expensive too. It's not as famous. But anyway, then this one changed to this one in December of 97, and I'll say more about that in a second. And then this one changed to this one, basically same time that Mystic did, which was about December of 99. The furry, like the rainbow mane Mystic and the furry derby, were out for, I don't know, like 5 months. I never remember when these retired. It was just sometime in like the near the middle of 99. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, I have a few choice words to say about these two, because they've caused me a lot of, I wouldn't say grief, but like, I put a lot of effort into trying to figure something out with these. So if we look here, we've got the Gen 4 hang tag on this version. If you don't know the difference between Gen 4 and 5, the biggest difference is the font. I'll take the tag off of this one, I guess, or the protector, just so you can see. So, like, I'll definitely talk more about this in the dedicated tag generation video, but the Gen 5s use Comic Sans, the Gen 4s use like Arial and Times New Roman and kind of more professional looking ones like that. And then on the inside, it has a style number, birthday is written out as numbers, and then the bottom says visit our webpage, HTTP, and then the website. Whereas this one has no style number, the birthday is written out instead of numbers, doesn't say visit our webpage, and no HTTP on the website. So there's a few different differences, like a few differences there, but most people kind of lump 4 and 5 in together. Like in most cases, 4 is like less common, but not by enough to really make a difference. So why am I mentioning all this? It's because in every official source that I've seen, this version is listed as being possible as a Gen 5, and it will list it as being the same price as the Gen 4. I have searched like far and wide, and I have never found any indication of that actually being true. I've looked through hundreds of eBay listings and looked at the tags on these and never found a single one that's a Gen 5. I've also looked at this one to see if there's any Gen 4s of this, and I couldn't find any of those either. So it is my belief that they changed exactly with the tag generation, and there is zero spillover in either direction, because if there is a spillover, it is so uncommon that I've never found a single case of it existing, and it's just weird to me that this has gone like unchallenged for so long, basically. So I've actually brought this up to like the admins that work on the price guide, and I think they're going to change it. I know Karen Boker agrees with me that the Gen 5 no star probably doesn't exist. They couldn't find any records of it existing, so it was probably just like information that was entered into a database incorrectly and then just never got fixed. So that's just kind of my rant about those. It's really unimportant in the grand scheme of things, but figured I would share that. And if anybody wants to go through the trouble of trying to find a Gen 5 no star or a Gen 4 with star, you're welcome to do that, and message me if you ever find anything. And if you ever do this, also be sure to keep tag swapping in mind, because it's possible to take a tag off of one beanie and put it on another with it being like undetectable. So you would also need to make sure that the Tush tag matches. So if it would have to be a no star with a Gen 6 Tush or a with star with a Gen 5 Tush. But I'm not expecting anybody to actually look into this ever. It's like, who cares? But figured I'd mention it. So let's move on here. I'll do a couple of the less interesting ones, just since I'm kind of on a roll with that with Derby. And then we'll get to a couple more uniques. So I've got these in cases, and I'll take them out just to show them, I guess. This one barely even fits in the case as it is. So here's Lucky the Ladybug. And let me grab the other versions of this. Bam. Okay, this one drives me nuts because people online tend to not understand it, and I think it's not a difficult concept, but a lot of people seem to just have trouble grasping this one. So I'll explain it in detail and probably complain about it a little bit because that's what I do. Can I get better lighting on these? Definitely not if I'm going to do that. Okay. Anyway, so this is the original version. This is the 7 felt spot version. Called that because it has 7 spots. It's simple enough. And they're made out of felt. They're basically little circles that are glued onto the back. If you can kind of tell on some of these, it's like, yeah, it's not part of the fabric. They're glued on there. And you got to be kind of careful with these because they definitely can come off. If they ever do fall off, it is no longer mint. Like, you can always try to reattach them, but yeah. So sometimes you'll find ones that have fewer than 7 spots or just have a completely solid red back. And those still might be of slight interest to some people, but they're definitely not ideal. And so the 7 spot version can be a Gen 1, 2, or 3. Then, just like as I was saying with Derby, switching over exactly with the tag generation, that's what happened here. So when it went from 3 to 4, they just changed the way that this one works. So now the spots are no longer attached separately. They are part of the fabric. It's just they had red fabric with black spots, and that was it. And this version is usually called the 11 spot. And this one is called the 21 spot. Same thing, it's just the spots are smaller, closer together, a lot more of them on there. And the 21 spot is an unusual case because this wasn't a straight replacement. The release history on these was 7, 11, very briefly 21, and then 11 again. The 21 you can almost think of as sort of like I don't like to use the word error because there's like that word has like bad connotations now because people overuse it for everything, but it kind of just was like, they got a weird shipment of the fabric, they used it anyway, but then they switched back. And this one lasted like maybe a month. It's hard to really say for sure. My guess isn't really worth much, but I've seen it listed as being a February 97, like somewhere around there, and then just kind of changed it back shortly after. And that seems to work. It seems to fit the timeline pretty well, so I think that's pretty much what happened there. So this version is probably the rarest of the 3. Like, of course, if you got a Gen 1 of that, then it's going to be worth a lot more, but yeah, you don't see these too terribly often. The reason that people have issues with these is because of the names of them, because they're called 7, 11, and 21, and the 7 is always going to be 7 unless one falls off, but these are not the exact numbers. They are called that because that is an average of what they will usually have, and I feel like every 2 weeks or so, there's somebody on Facebook who is like, I was looking through the price guide and I saw the 3 versions of Lucky and I checked mine and mine has, how many spots we got there? Got 1, 2, 3, 4.5, or like 3.5, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do I count this? Like, it's like, don't ever do that. That's, and they're just like, mine has like 8. Is that an error? Is it worth more? And I want to punch these people. I can't really explain how irritated I get at that. Like, I get it. You don't know the hobby. I can't expect you to be psychic and know, like, exactly everything that everything means. But, like, I feel like, it's common sense. Like, nobody's counting the number of spots on these. And, like, oh no, one went through, like, quality control with only 10 spots. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's an average. It drives me nuts. So this one can be like, I don't know, like 8 through 15 maybe. Basically all you need to know is, does it have a lot of spots? If it does, then it's the 21 version. It's probably not going to be because these are pretty rare. That's pretty much it. Sorry, I get really annoyed at that one. Also, yeah, me dropping stuff, cool. So, now that I'm done complaining about ladybugs, throw this one in my box of commons. Put this one over to the side, I guess. Okay, so this one's more straightforward. And actually, I wanted to show the tags on these too. I'll do that for, I wanted to show like the later Gen 3 tags. I'll do it for this one. So here's Stripes the Tiger. We got the Gen 3 version and the Gen 4 and 5 version. The difference is pretty clear. The thing that is less clear is what to call these. I've seen a lot of different ways of describing them. This one is thin, dark, gold stripes. This one is like wide, light, caramel stripes. It's like any of those adjectives will work. So it's like, gold versus caramel, whatever, thin versus wide. You'll see kind of varying names for them, but basically it's just the old and the new one. That's pretty much all there is to these. This was a June 95 release, and it changed over exactly the same time as the Gen 3 tag did. It's only Stripes and Lucky that did that, and then Derby with the exact change between 4 and 5 as far as I can tell. This one's a little weirder because it has a variation called Fuzzy Belly, where basically just the fabric used on the belly is just a lot thicker. Why does that version exist? I don't know. It's really weird. I've seen other beanies that have stuff like that, where I think like Freckles, maybe Ziggy, like any of the ones that kind of have like a pattern on them can kind of come that way. And it's not always the belly. Sometimes it can be like, just part of the leg or something like that. But yeah, Fuzzy Belly Stripes is a thing that's officially recognized as like a proper variant, I guess, just because a lot of them were made. But when I say a lot of them, it's not common. It's still very rare, and I don't have one. But it was common enough to be looked at as more than just like a one-off oddity, I guess. The other thing with these, super, super minor thing, is the tail. On this one, it's like really flat at the end, and you can see it's like 2 halves kind of just sewn together. And on this one, it's more rounded and just kind of better put together. The flat tail changed to the rounded tail sometime in early Gen 4. So probably like, I'm guessing like October of 96. You can also see the difference on Velvet the Panther and Freckles the leopard. Freckles isn't a Gen 3, but yeah, you can see it on that one too, I know. But yeah, it's like nobody cares. Nobody cares about that one. I've seen that mentioned in Beanie World magazine and literally nowhere else. It's not a variant that anyone would pay attention to. I just figured I'd mention it anyway. So let's look at a later Gen 3 design. So compared to Happy, I guess let me grab Happy down. Okay. So like I said, there's a few different Gen 1s, few Gen 2s, few Gen 3s. I don't have one or two to show, so I'll show this one just because I've got it. So the front of these looks exactly the same. One thing I'll mention here, just because I don't know whenever else I'll talk about this, is the gold trim around the tie letters. It's only there on the older tags. You won't have that on Gen 4 or 5. And sometimes you will find ones, it's not on either of these two, but sometimes you'll find ones where the gold trim doesn't actually line up exactly with the white parts of the white letters. You'll kind of see like a little bit of red inside. That just kind of happens sometimes. It'll be like counterfeits will have that too, and it's usually worse when it's on those, but there are official tags that have that as well. But anyway, so the back side here, we're going to see an obvious difference. We already looked at that one before. This one is remove all swing tags before giving this item to a child, and then all that stuff on the bottom has a CE to the left. Pretty much the same as a Gen 4 tag. I've got brown teddy here for comparison. It's like, this one doesn't have the CE on it, but like the bottom text is a little different, but essentially the same thing. And then on the inside, we've got what I called, on the other one before, I called it the safety information. This one is 3 addresses. We'll look at the two side by side again. And then the right side is pretty much the same. Actually, I think it might be exactly the same. So yeah, I'll have to go into more on this in the dedicated tag generation video, but like I said, there's a few versions of these. I will point out while I've got it here, this one has 3 copyright symbols on the left, one for each address. There's a version that came before this that only has the top copyright and not the other 2. And sometimes the back will also say, please remove all swing tags before giving this item to a child under 36 months. Those just kind of changed at different times. I think the 3 copyrights came out at the start of '96, and then the 36 month got shortened like a few months after. I know aboutbeanies.com lists, says the 36 month tag will always have 1 copyright and the other one will always have 3, but there is like, those were changed separately. I've got some where it has like 1 but not the other. Not a big deal for right now. It's super minor stuff, but you know what? That's what we're here for. Super minor stuff. Ah, okay. Flutter's making an explosive entrance. So yeah, here's Flutter the butterfly. I've got 2 of these. This container is like completely broken. So yeah, Flutter's pretty neat, just because of the different colors it can have. It's definitely more simplistic than the other butterflies that came out later, but for early Beanie, I kind of like this one. I bought this one. It has this really huge crease on the tag, so of course that kind of reduced its value a bit, and I really wanted to have this one in perfect condition, but I could never find one for a reasonable price, so I settled for this. There's that 36 month tag just for reference, I guess. But yeah, so I bought this one and then ended up getting this one as a gift with some of my pea spares when Karen sent me those. So I just kind of keep both of them. I like the colors on this one more. I wish I had the tag on that one. But yeah, not too much to say about this one really. I will mention the eye is just, it's made of thread that's just kind of knotted. it doesn't have plastic eyes like most other beanies. And counterfeits of these will usually have plastic eyes, so that's a dead giveaway if you see one like that. And I can't take this one out of the case because I have it authenticated. I didn't buy it that way on purpose. I couldn't ever find a good caw, and this one was cheap, so I got the authenticated one. So yeah, pretty simple black bird here. Similar design to Kiwi the toucan. Yeah, reflection. Yeah, here's the certificate. This is a Peggy Gallagher one. There's only 2 authenticators that are still around now. It's her and then the True Blue Beans with Becky Estensoro. There's other ones you'll still see, like that kind of, they were around older, like back in the day, like PB bags. But those are the only 2 that are around now. And Peggy does the, Peggy has kind of a weird way of authenticating these where you get a little certificate that doesn't go in the case that has more information. So it'll have like spots to write in the generations and when it was authenticated and all that stuff. It'll give you this one, it'll have this ID number on it, which matches up with the ID number inside the case, which is more simplistic. The True Blue Beans ones just have all the info inside the case itself, so you don't have to kind of keep track of a separate thing. Alright, now we've got the 3 dinosaurs. I was grouping all these together because, well, I guess let me put them in frame first before I start talking about them. So we got Bronte, Rex, and Steg, which I will start to take out of the cases now, I suppose. So these 3, along with Flutter, Caw, and Bumble, which I haven't shown yet, they all retired in June of 1996, right as the tag was changing from Gen 3 to 4. So of those 6, Bumble can have a Gen 4 hang tag, but none of the other ones can. Well, that's why I was saving Bumble for last, because it's just kind of unique that way. But those all retired, and then that was also when Stripes and Lucky changed over. So the 3 dinosaurs are some of the most popular beanies. I showed these off in one of my vlogs from a year ago. I was very lucky to find these for a really good deal. I got the 3 of them together for, I think it was about $100. I'll have to put that in the video. But usually they sell for almost that much just individually. So I was very thankful to get these. This is actually what kicked off me collecting Gen 3s in the first place, because I thought I was going to be satisfied with just having all the Gen 4 and 5 ones, because those are common, those are the ones I grew up with. I'm like, I'll just get all these, I'll be happy with that. But then I'm like, ooh, that's a really good deal on these, let me get these, and let me get this one, I add this to my collection, and just kind of kept going from there. But yeah, I love these 3. My favorite one is Stag. I just think it's, I don't know, it's my favorite dinosaur out of the 3, I guess. But yeah, these 3, one of the more popular trios. They can have, this is the case with Flutter, Caw, and Bumble as well. They can have either a Gen 1 or 2 Tush tag. Anytime you have a beanie that can have either, the Gen 1 is more sought after, usually worth a little bit more. Colors on these can also vary quite a bit. My Rex is mostly red here, as you can see. Sometimes these can have like kind of blue or purple patches on them. Those are, with any tie-dyed beanies, variance in the colors like that can often impact how much they're worth. They got a little bit of purple down kind of by the lid here, but mine's mostly solid color. Bronte is usually a little less, like, it's a little more uniform. It's just kind of a mix of blue and sometimes a little bit of green. So you won't see as much variance on this one. And then Stag can be a range of brown, yellow, green. This one has a pretty nice green underside. I like that. Bronte is typically considered the rarest of the 3, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. I've seen a rumor that it's because it has the same exact fabric type as Sting the Stingray, whereas the other two didn't, so they maybe just produced less of them. Not sure exactly. But, yeah, pretty cool trio. And let me grab Bumble. Here we're basically coming up on the end of Gen 3s, and the ones I'm going to be showing now, the ones I own are not Gen 3, but that is by design. Because, as I said, I originally tried to collect all the Gen 4s, and so these were kind of some of the crown jewels of that collection. And I still prefer to have them in this form, so I'll show them all real briefly and then I'll go through them one at a time. So this is Inch with felt antennas, or antennae. Here is 7-line tank. We'll look at those more in a second here. And then here is Bumble. So all three of these are actually harder to find as a Gen 4 than as a Gen 3. Just because they changed. Basically, this one retired June of '96, same as the last few that I showed, but for some reason, this one went on to get the Gen 4 tag, whereas none of the other ones did. I'm guessing it was because they just maybe didn't finalize like which things they were retiring yet, and so they printed some of these and they figure like, or maybe they just had like more Bumbles kind of pre-assembled and they're like, well, we're not going to throw these out, we might as well make tags for them and stuff, and they were just trying to unify everything, having the newer tags at that point. But yeah, you don't see these very often. This one, not including like variations like the Inch and the tank that I just showed, or some like more specific tag variants. Bumble is definitely the rarest Gen 4. Just in terms of like going by like what animal it is. You do not come across these very often at all. So I don't have as interesting of a story with this Bumble as I did with my Violet Teddy, but this one, I'm already putting the thing back in the tag. I should have shown it on camera before I did, but it has I've got a big crease on the back of this one. Can we see that? You can kind of see it a little bit in the top left. But it's got a big crease, and the front is kind of pinkish. It actually isn't showing up as pink in the video. It looks pink in real life, though. So it's faded a bit. It was advertised as mint condition, and so I bought this one for $40 plus 10 shipping, which is a pretty good deal for it. But at the time, it was the most expensive beanie I had bought. And I got it, and I was disappointed to find that the tag was not great like that. And so I messaged the person and I was like, this is okay, but it said it was going to be mint and the price was assuming it was mint, so I don't really feel comfortable giving you like positive feedback since it was incorrectly labeled. And they're like, oh my god, no, don't do that, no, I promise I can give a refund. And I'm just like, okay, whoa, hold on. I didn't realize there was so much power in me threatening to not give feedback here. So I'm like, no, it's okay. I won't ask you to refund the entire thing. How about you just give me $10 off for the shipping? And then, like, within a minute, they're like, done. And they just sent me the $10 back. I'm like, okay. So I got my Bumble for $40. Not too bad. I've thought a few times about buying another one that's in mint condition or buying a Gen 3 Bumble, but I don't really need to. I'm happy with this one. So the other two, we'll do tank first because it's more confusing. I'm gonna have to dig through my shelf again. Okay, I have a feeling we're gonna be talking about tank for quite a while here, which is unfortunate because this one's really not that interesting to me, but it's got a lot of little things. So this is the original tank. Before I show any of the variants, I'll explain a little bit about the history of this one. So, the checklists and calendars and everything released by Ty are going to say that this was released in January of '95, which is absolutely not correct. It was January of '96. So it released with Gen 3 hang tag, Gen 1 Tush, and it has this kind of elongated body with no defined shell or anything, and it has 7 lines on the back. Then when the tag changed to Gen 4, it kept this design for a very short time, and then changed to the extremely similar design that is completely identical, except it has 9 lines on the back instead of 7. So this is called a 7-line no shell and 9-line no shell tank. And then before that one was out for very long, probably, I never know when to say this one changed over. I think it was around December. No, actually, no. Sources say it was probably around December, but I think it was earlier. I think it was probably more like July or August of 97. We changed to the common version, which has this ridge along the bottom, which is the shell. This is 9-line with shell tank. Mine also happens to be Canadian, but that doesn't really matter much. So we got the 3 different versions, and this is the only one that can be a Gen 3. This one was out for, like, again, if we're going by my estimations, I think this one was out for like maybe 2 months, maybe 3, before it changed to the more common one, and then this one ran from whenever that switched up until October of 97. Yeah, it's like basically the 2 no-shell versions are of comparable rarity. The Gen 3 version of this is way more common than the Gen 4 version from what I've seen. This is another one that I had to get authenticated. This one is the True Blue Beans. And the diploma, or the certificate here, makes no mention of any specifics of the hang tag, so I'll explain what I mean about that in a minute. But yeah, this one, I only bought it. Here's the thing with authentication. I definitely don't want to convince people not to buy it because, you know, conflict of interest. I kind of work with that group, but I personally don't like to, because I like being able to take them out of the cases, basically. And with this one, I would have to like actually dismantle the case, and then it wouldn't be like mint anymore, and I'd have to like send it back in if I ever wanted to get it redone like that. It's just, it takes up more space because it's in this, and I can't look at it carefully, but it definitely keeps them in good condition. Leads to some stuff like this back leg kind of sticking into the body. It's like, how do I shake that out? I can't fix it. So it's like trying to get this thing to stand up inside the case sometimes is a little difficult. I think I actually got it pretty well there. But yeah, I bought that one that way. That one was really hard to find. This one was also kind of hard to find. I've seen some people claim that this version is actually rarer than the 7 line, and if we're talking in general, then yes. If we're counting this versus the Gen 4 of this, I would say the Gen 4 of this is rarer than this, then the Gen 3 of this, and then the common one. There's still more to it than that, unfortunately. I wish I could say that that was it. So let's take a look at the hang tag on this one. If I can get the thing off. Always be really careful taking these off here. Okay, so let's look inside the tag here. Let me see if I've got the best possible focus on this. I think I can make it a little more sharp. Yeah. Okay, so the thing we're looking for is the 3rd line of the poem. At the end it says border, spelled with an A. That is not the correct version of the word border to use in that context. It's not supposed to have an A in it. And beanies are definitely no strangers to having errors in them, and the majority of the time they're not really worth anything. This is one of the more debatable ones. So I'd like to preface this with me saying that this is my personal opinion, and I don't actually have the amount of resources and like hands-on experience with many of these to back this claim up for certain. But the price guide lists the shelled version of Tank with the border poem to actually be worth quite a bit. I think it's dropped between the second most recent version of the price guide and the current one, but it's still one of the more notable poem errors according to that. And this one, the 9 line with the poem error, is listed as considerably more, like well over $100, and that is not what I paid for this. So I am guessing that rather than me actually just lucking out and happening to get like the rarest version of this one for cheaper than it should have been, I don't think they changed the tag and then like I guess let me say it this way. I don't think they had the wrong tag and the correct one running at the same time. I think they just changed it over and that was it. So I want to say that probably every 7 line has the tag error. I don't know this, and I don't even know if mine has it because I can't open it up, but they probably do. If I ever see evidence to the contrary of this, I've also got a comeback to that. And I think that every version of this probably has the 9 line. Or I'm sorry, every version of this has the poem error. And then this one only sometimes does. And the reason that you might sometimes see this one with the correct poem is probably just because of tag swapping, because it is a pretty common practice when you have a Beanie that changed versions like this. Like, let's say that this tag was really badly creased. It's like, well, I've got this one. I can relatively easily take the plastic connector out of the back of this little felt ear here and just, you know, it's kind of hard with this protector on to show it, but like I could like feed that back through the hole, take it out, attach it to this one, and because it's the same name and everything, you would be none the wiser. So I have a pretty good hunch that every 9 line that has the correct poem is probably a result of somebody doing that. Can't say for certain, but that's my guess. And part of the reason I also say that is because I did also see an eBay listing once for a common like shelled version of Tank that had the poem error, but it also had no website listed. Do I have I'm trying to remember. Let me show what I mean by that. Here's my kiwi. So yeah, at the bottom of this tag here, this one has a sticker covering it. You can see the text underneath it. When they first switched to the Gen 4 hang tag, they printed that website on there before they actually had the rights to it. There was another company that was tie.com originally. And so for the first couple months of release, you'll see some that have nothing printed there at all, or they'll have the sticker covering it, or it'll be like scratched off or have whiteout covering it, or sometimes just have the entire bottom of the tag snipped off. And those can be kind of interesting things to find. The snipped ones not as much because you can't prove that they came that way and that you didn't just do that yourself, but those will sell for more than usual, maybe about $20-$30 sometimes. But yeah, I've seen a 9-line Tank with no website, with the border with an A poem error, and that bothered me for a couple of reasons, because before seeing that, I was under the impression that this one changed in December, and that does not jive with the timeline at all, because they definitely had the rights to the website that far in, and it just it seemed really weird to me that like it just basically just didn't make sense, because it's like you could also say like, oh well, why didn't they take a tag from an older one and put it onto that? And the answer is because why would you? Why would you take a tag off of a more valuable beanie and put it on a common one? Doing it the other way makes sense. So it's like, I have to assume that one was legit, which means that this changed over pretty early on. And, like, if this one... I don't know. I think I've made my point. I'm kind of rambling. I didn't want to get into all of this extreme detail like I am. So, let's move these off to the side here. So, here's inch. Put that in the box. Here's inch. This one, I wish I didn't have as much to say about, but I do. We're going to be rambling again. So, the original inch, this is the original inch, has these, again, they're called antennae, or, yeah, it's like just feelers, whatever they are. They're made of felt. They're just kind of like a flat, like, paddle shape, kind of. And then they changed it to yarn, which is, you know, it's yarn. I'm surprised by the number of people who actually don't know the difference between the yarn and the felt. I've had to explain that to more people than I thought I would. But either way, this was the version that released as a Gen 3. It was probably June of 95. I've seen evidence it might have been later, but either way, it was a Gen 3, and it changed over a few months into the Gen 4 window. The sources will claim it was in October of 97, but I know that that's not correct because of anecdotal evidence, because I bought Inch as probably one of my first 20 when I was a kid. I know what my first 5 were, and I think I got this one relatively early on. It was like in the first couple months, and I started collecting in November of 96, and I had the yarn version, and it was long before October of 97, so I know they changed it earlier, and also I just know. There's ways to tell with finding them online, and basically these are really scarce. When I said before that Bumble and the 7-line tank are rarer as a Gen 4 than a 3, I lumped this one in with those as well because I have always struggled finding these. It took me really long to find this one, and I found a few more since then, but they're still pretty uncommon. You don't see them as often as like 21 Spot Lucky, Brown Belly Sly, which we haven't seen yet. They're pretty scarce, so I think it was early on. And here's the other thing I have to say about this one. It's going to be me getting into rambly details again. I have reason to suspect that mine has been tampered with, and let's take a look at why. So, take the hang tag protector off, if I can. Please. Okay, so let's look at the Tush tag first. We've got pretty standard looking Gen 3 Tush tag, made in China. Surface washable, so surface is spelled wrong, and I didn't show this on any of my other ones, but actually let me double check my 9-line tank. That one has surface also, right? Yeah, my 9-line tank is surface. My Bumble definitely is. I can't say for certain when that changed over, but my estimation is fall of 96. So sometime around September, October. All of the original Gen 4 beanies will have that error. It's not particularly notable. If you've got one that has it, it's like not really worth mentioning. But either way, that kind of dates this too. This was an early Gen 4 release. That's the point I'm getting to. And if we look in the hang tag, you know, it's a Gen 4 hang tag. What is there to say about it? Well, the thing is, the address is on the left. The second one says Ferrum Hats. And from what I've found through just looking up a ton of different beanies with like well-established like introduction and retirement dates and kind of comparing a bunch of stuff, Ferrum hats didn't actually come around until about July-ish of 97. And I have evidence of this. If we look at Tuffy here, which is a pretty normal beanie, Tuffy was one of 14 beanies to be released in May of 1997, May 11th, Mother's Day. And when these came out, there was something kind of weird about them, wherein they were released in Canada first, and they had their name spelled in all caps inside the hang tag. All 14 of them, well, all of them except for Peace. It was Baldy, Doodle, Echo, Jolly, Waves, Dottie, Nanook, Pugsley, Tuffy, Blizzard, Rory, Chip, Claude. I think that was all of them. But yeah, all of those had all caps names, and at this point they still had the Waterlooville address as the second one. Any of the older Gen 4s and even like the Gen 3s will have Waterlooville as the address. That didn't change over until some point after these tags stopped being printed. While I'm on the subject of this, I'll just mention right now, Claude and Tuffy, this one's not Canadian, it doesn't have a second Tush tag. Claude and Tuffy still had the all caps names in the US for a short while. None of the other 11 did, so those two are still pretty common to have that. The other 11 with the all caps name are pretty rare and will tend to sell for about $30-40 if you can find an interested person. But anyway, that was all a very long way of saying that I'm pretty sure the inch that I have here has a hang tag from a later inch that was just kind of switched in. And because this one can kind of just be jammed into the body and doesn't like stick outside of anything, I can't even see the other end of the plastic connector to see if it's been like bent. So I have a pretty strong suspicion that that's what happened with mine, and it's unfortunate, but like it's such a minor thing. Like I only figured that out by doing like, you know, really in-depth research to find out like when that stuff changed. And so basically it's just you should never have a Suffrus Tush tag and a Ferrum Hats hang tag on the same beanie, because it doesn't make sense. There's no way that the timeline would have allowed that to happen. But as it doesn't really matter too much. I'm certainly not going to buy another one just to fix that one issue. Okay, so Bumble and the early version of Tank and the early version of Inch were like the holdovers where they were rare as Gen 4 and more common as a Gen 3. Now we're getting to the stuff that is only available as a Gen 4 and is like notable within that tag, because most of the Gen 4s are very common. The vast majority of them aren't worth over $5, but these are the ones that are. So I've already gone over these in a video before, but we're going to do them again. Hopefully not spend as much time on them as we have been with the others. So let's start out with Sly here. So right off the bat, we can tell how different these are now. They look identical from the top. No, they don't. That's all there is to this one. The brown belly version was the original release. And yep, there we've got that Suffrus tag again, if you can make that out. So this one, it was one of the first new Gen 4s to be released. Like all of the older beanies that didn't retire by that point got the updated tag, but this one was introduced as like a new one in June of 96. This one stuck around for about 3 months. The sources, like the Thai sources list, this one is changing in August. And I see no reason to believe that that's not true. And so, pretty straightforward one with that. And then we've got Magic, which is always a favorite of mine to talk about. Magic is so stupid. This one's just, it's so dumb to talk about. It really is. So here's the thing with Magic. If you've watched any of my other videos, you've probably heard me complain about this one before. Can we actually get this one darkened a little bit? I think we might need that. Yeah, I'll maybe brighten it a bit later. So, I remember earlier when I mentioned that Mystic the Unicorn can have like the kind of brown thread on it instead of the pink. That's a really minor thing that nobody ever pays attention to. And the same thing happened with Magic, except on this one it is paid attention to. And I'm pretty sure the only reason for that is because it was just kind of discovered earlier on, and people had nothing better to do back in 1997, so they listed it as a variant. So, Magic was first released in Gen 3, June of 95, and it's solid white, it has this iridescent material for the wings, and there is pink thread on the wings. And when it was originally released, it had this pink that kind of blends in pretty well. It'll sometimes be a little lighter than this. But then, for a short period of time in fall of 96, which was the Gen 4 window, it switched to this hot pink thread. I'm having flashbacks to describing the whiskers on Nip and Zip here. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Like, I'll go into more about it, but so this one I have here is a later release. It has a early Gen 4 Tush, because it has the one with like the sticker attached to it that basically they had like an overstock of Gen 3 tags, and the Gen 4 changed nothing except for adding that star to the left of the heart, so they're like, we'll just put it on a sticker and then just put that on the tag, and it kind of a waste of effort, honestly, but that was what they did. So this one dates to around June, July of 97. And this one has the tag attached to the wing. The earlier Magics will have the tag attached to the ear. And this is a Gen 3 Suffress tag. But not every Gen 3 Tush Suffress tag on ear Magic is going to be hot pink. Only some of them are, because it's a pretty rare variation within that particular window. And mine, you can even see, has the thread like pretty clearly visible on the outside of the wings and on the spinities. So yeah, this is honestly the best. This is the best shot I've ever gotten of this hot pink Magic before. I can never get a good picture of this thing, because it's like really hard to show the difference between these in photos, because lighting makes a gigantic difference. Here you can see it pretty clearly. When I joined the Facebook group, the Beanie Babies Collectors, I joined specifically to ask about this one, because I have a third Magic that's in the closet. I'm not going to go grab it. That is kind of a middle tone between these two that I thought was a hot pink, and I bought it off of eBay for $50. It was listed as a hot pink. It had a Suffress tag. It had it on the ear, and I posted it, and they're like, "No, it's not hot pink. Sorry." There's a range on these. You'll have ones that are so light they're almost white. You'll have ones that are like this that are super bright, like almost red, and anything in between. The price guide currently lists like 4 versions of this. There's like pale, medium, it's like pale, light, medium, and hot. That's a relatively new thing. The old magazines and stuff always just listed as light pink, hot pink. Hot pink is the only one that matters. All of the others are more or less interchangeable. You don't have to ever like care about which particular one you have. But yeah, if you're ever going for a full collection with all the variations, this one does count. I wish it didn't, because it's so minor, but like, it's listed as a separate variant, and it's hard to find. I bought this one off of BB Toy Store, which is a reputable site, and I'm glad I got it, because it's the one I got is like it really stands out. I think it's really obvious that this one's hot pink, but like, if you're just buying off of some unknown seller, if their photo, it's like, let's change this exposure a bit, and like, it's like you can still see it, but it's really easy to pass off a lighter one as a hot pink and have the camera kind of like hide that, basically. I don't know, I'm rambling again. Let's put this one away and move on. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the more nitpicky ones. These are just generally not as interesting. I'm going to grab my... Yeah. They're maybe not as interesting is the wrong phrase, but there's not as much to say about them usually, or like we're getting into stuff where it's just the tags that are different. So first let's look at Liberty. So aside from the ribbon on this one being a mangled mess, these are basically identical. I will point out right now, the nose is brown. It will always be brown. The nose is always brown on Liberty, Maple, Curly, Valentino, 1997 Teddy. Did I say Halo? Basically, there's people online who will claim that any bear with a brown nose is rare or is like a super like limited variant or error or something. It's not. They're always the same. Like, the one time that this ever matters is on MC Beanie, which is the MasterCard bear, which is like a Gen 8 or 9, I think. I don't remember. It's something later on after 2000. There's that one, and then there's ones that have like flag noses. That's the only time it ever matters. Yeah, so these are identical, but tags are a little different. So here's the thing with Liberty. This one was the first Gen 4 with a giant asterisk attached to that, because all the Gen 4s basically kind of, came out at the same time, but I think this was the first one to have like the tag designed that way, and it was part of the initial release batch of like new ones. This came out with lefty and righty, which are the other ones with flags on them, and a bunch of other ones, but Liberty is really weird. It has a bunch of variants that are specific to it. So, on the hang tag, first thing we'll see is the connector is not red. Now, Gen 1 through 3 beanies can sometimes be that way. They can just have that clear connector, and it is no more or less rare than the red one. It's actually not any rarer on the Liberty either, but it's the only Gen 4 that ever came that way, and it's kind of weird that it ever did in the first place. Then this one inside the hang tag, we've got one with no website on the bottom. This one doesn't have the sticker either. Oh, it looks like it's been scratched off though. You can kind of see that in the reflection. So yeah, this one has a weird birthday. It doesn't give a specific day. It just says summer 1996, and then it says Atlanta, Georgia underneath, which is also unusual. Most of the time they don't do anything like that. And that's because this one was supposed to kind of coincide with the Olympics, and so the very first Liberties ever released will say Summer Olympics 1996 on that top line, and then in the poem it'll say I am called Liberty, but it'll have a capital L. For some reason they changed it to a lowercase l for the later tags. I don't know why they did that. But those Summer Olympic ones are like super, super rare. Those sell in like, high hundreds most of the time. I don't have one because I don't have that much money laying around to spend on that. I can spend money on a hot pink magic, but no, I'm not going to be dropping $500 on a Summer Olympics Liberty. If I find one for cheap, then maybe. But that one is the most expensive Gen 4 by a considerable margin, if you have that version. And the other thing about this one is, on the Tush tag, we've got the Suffress Washable, which is nothing new. We've seen that plenty of times. But also, the Beanie Babies collection. So, that is a typo unique to this tag. Usually when you have typos like that, it's on like every beanie that was out at that particular time, or like at least a pretty good amount of them. Like in early Gen 5, I've got this in my pocket. I put this in here for later. This is a hoppity tag, I think. Let me take it out and check. Come on. Floppity, either way. So yeah, this is an early Gen 5 tag where it says original spelled with 2 I's, and then on the back it says Sufis wash, not Sufferus, but Sufis. And usually on the inside it'll also have a semicolon in the date of birth instead of a colon. These were available on like 11 different Gen 5s. It's Hippity Hoppity Floppity, Curly, Valentino, Peace, Ears, Blackie, Rory, Squealer, I think like one more. And yeah, these are pretty common. It doesn't stop people from constantly posting them as super rare, ultra rare, oh my god, but yeah, they're nothing special. I brought this one out specifically because it has a CE on the back, which is, I don't know what to think about that, because I've never, like, remember way earlier in the video when I pointed that out on the Gen 3 tag and the Gen 4 tag didn't have it? Now I've got a Chops here, a Gen 4 Chops the Lamb that has CE on the back. And this one is also made in Korea. Ooh, my camera's falling. Oh. Yeah, made in Korea. We're getting off topic here, but I'll mention it here since I've got it. Early Gen 4s can sometimes be made in Korea instead of China, and Gen 1 through 3 can also be Korea. And Korean ones are usually valued higher than Chinese because they're just less common. It's a niche market, but people will buy those for more. Like a Gen 4 Korean can go for about 30, 40, as opposed to like 5. There's also the combination of Indonesian with a Canadian Tush tag, which sells for about 20, 30. But Korean ones were usually sold in Europe, and most of them didn't make it to the US, which is also partly why they're worth more, just because the US had the bigger market at the time. But the point is, that one had the CE on the back because it was a European tag. This one, I just found this tag sitting disconnected at a Goodwill, and I just picked it up. And I don't know why it has that, because I've never seen another Gen 5 tag with a CE on the back. Like, that's a European thing. But I have Britannia and Germania, which are a UK and a German exclusive, and those don't have the CE, so it's just weird. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I forget if I was making a point here. So let's just put Rarity back. And now we'll look at Maple. So, very similar bear, Canadian flag instead of American. Only has one. It has one red ribbon instead of a red and blue. This particular Maple is special because it has the Special Olympics tag on it. I'll just zoom in on that a little better. I don't know how many of these were made. I think it was like 10,000. So they're not super rare, but they're more interesting than the more standard maples that you'll see in, like, that were actually sold in stores. And I know Valentino can also have Special Olympics tag. I think there might be one other one. I don't remember. But so yeah, Maple always has a Canadian Tush tag because it was a Canada exclusive. And I've also heard a rumor that that Maple can only have a Gen 3, 5, or 6 Tush and never a Gen 4. I've never looked into that well enough to say, but I'll mention that anyway. But here's another Maple, which has a very faded star on it, which that's not why this one is special, but I'll point that out now anyway, because that's another thing that drives me up the wall, is when people post any beanie that has a white star or like a faded one, and they just say, "Oh, white star error." I've read online that those are worth tons of money, and I have to just be like, they have been authenticated, but no, it's faded. And then people will fight this. Like, they'll always say, like, it can't be faded. Like, the rest of the tag is perfectly fine looking. It's not faded at all. I'm like, the yellow fades before the red. I don't care. Like, I don't want to shoot people down, but, like, there's no way to prove that it wasn't faded. And even if it wasn't, it's basically just, the printer ran out of yellow ink, which is a very minor tag error. Like, I don't think people are really clamoring to buy those. Now, I've seen ones where, like, the text is really heavily offset, or, like, there's no text at all on the star. It's just a yellow star with no words. Or, like, on the inside, the tag is completely blank, or the text is way off-center, like, going off into the other half of the tag, that type of stuff. Those can be worth more, because those are, like, actually interesting and, like, are very clearly errors and not just this thing sat out in the sun. So I don't like the white stars. Those drive me nuts because they're not really anything special that people like to say they are. But anyway, the reason I have this one is because this is Pride. This is not Maple. And this one is one of the other really rare Gen 4s. This one cost me like $90. I got this with a B9 Liberty, not the one I showed earlier, but a different one. They were a bundle deal. I had to get them together, so I didn't want that one, but together they cost me $90 with the shipping. So it's like, if we take out the shipping and that one, I think this was maybe like, I don't know, $65-$70, which given the faded creased tag, not too bad. These usually will sell for about $100. The reason this one's so special is because it's not actually terribly uncommon to have a beanie with the wrong tag attached. Right here I've got Scoop that says Rory on it. Rory is a lion. That can happen. I actually wrote an article about those and submitted it to Beanie Baby's Price Guide. They link that one to people all the time. Basically, it's just a factory error that can happen sometimes. It's like, whatever. Sure, it'll be worth a few more bucks, but there's so many possible combinations of X with Y's tag, X with Z's tag, X with A's tag, A with B's tag. Like, it just... You would never be able to collect them all. So usually people don't care. But this one's different because there was no beanie named Pride. That was just the original name for Maple that lasted like one shipment. It was like, because the hang tag still says Maple, it's only the Tush tag that says that. And so I think it's estimated there were about 3,000 of these made. I'm not sure if there's any real figures on that, but either way, not very many of them, pretty expensive, and Maple was already pretty hard to come by when it was first released anyway, because Canada didn't have as much of a collector's base as the US did, and apparently they were price gouging beanies because they didn't have the same like standards of like kind of being forced to put them within a certain price range or something. I'm not exactly sure. But since we're looking at miss tags, I've got a few here. So I'll just grab them in whatever order. So this is Tuck. It's supposed to be Tusk, but the hang tag says Tuck, and that's just a misspelling basically. It happened for, I don't know, a month or two in late '96. That's about it. There's a few different poems this one can have. Tuck will always have this exact one. The last line can sometimes will be like, I can't even think of it offhand. I'm not gonna. There's like 4 different last lines this one can have. They're all just slightly different. It's not a big deal. The other thing I'll mention is with tusk, like right here, the tusks kind of like point like inwards. I have a Gen 3 where they point outwards. That is not a variation that's listed anywhere. It's not something that people care about, but apparently it can be made either way. Figured I'd point it out. Here's a Sparky with a tag that says Dottie. I didn't bring out my Dottie from the other room, and I'm not going to go grab it, but Dottie is another Dalmatian that was made to replace Sparky because of a like possible copyright issue with the name belonging to like the Firefighters Association or something. So this one, it still has a Sparky hang tag, but Dottie is essentially the same beanie, but the ears and the tail are solid black instead of the white spotted ones. Has a totally different poem, but basically they changed the tush tag on Sparky before they changed the hang tag or the like ears and tail. It's kind of weird that they did that, honestly, but that's just kind of a thing that happened. And here I've got Snort. Lots of rumors about Snort being rare. It's not true. Similar thing to happen to Snort that happened with Dottie, so let me just focus in over here real quick. I don't feel like actually going to grab it, but that one right there that looks like this is Tabasco. You can see that its foot is solid red. Snort has like the cream colored hooves on it. So Tabasco was the original. It was from Gen 3 originally and then went into Gen 4. And then January of 97, it changed to Snort, got the very slight design change, and just the name changed, and that was basically it. And for some reason, the internet seems to believe that Snort is worth a ton of money. It's not. It never has been. Tabasco used to be worth a decent amount, but it isn't anymore, unless it's a Gen 3. Snort just never has been. But there is a Snort tag that says, although Tabasco is not so tall, because unlike Dottie, unlike Sparky changing to Dottie, this one kept the exact same poem except for the name. But the thing is, this isn't even an original Snort release. This one, or actually this one does have a Gen 3 tush tag. I have another one that's it has like a really mangled hang tag, and this one has the sticker on it. But yeah, it's like the Canadian one specifically can sometimes have that Tabasco tag, and that one is worth more. So it's like, if we're talking about Gen 4, Tabasco, relatively common. You know, it's, by Gen 4 standards, it's not that common, but it's like $5-10. Snort, very common. Snort with Tabasco tag, that one's like $40. So, got one more. Before we get to that one, hold on. Here's a couple sports exclusives. This one's less interesting, so I'll show it first. This is the very first sports promo beanie. The card there says pretty much everything you'd need to know about it. Does it have anything on the back? Just the Cubs logo. But yeah, I picked this one up just because it was the first one. There's tons of these. Just various baseball, basketball games, other types of sports did them too, but they would just have these giveaways, give away random beanies, usually related to their mascot. And they would come with a card like this, and if you have it like complete with the ticket stub and all that stuff, they can be of interest to people who are like fans of that team usually, or just diehard collectors in general. I just picked this one up because it was the first. Also, I'll mention, I don't know if this is actually the same cubby that came with it, because that has a Gen 4 tush tag, and I have a suspicion that that tag hadn't come out yet by this point, but I don't know for certain. This one's more interesting, because this is the Harry Carey Daisy. So this one, this is the only sports promo beanie that has a unique tag like that. It has the caricature on the left, and then has a dedication on the right, basically. And then this is the point where I go, "Hey, if you had to choose between being the top scientist in your field or getting mad cow disease, which one would you pick?" But anyway, yeah, other than that, Beanie is completely normal. It's a Gen 5. And here's just some stuff that it came with. We got a little pin and a patch. And here is whatever this thing is. Here is the ticket. If I can get that out without bending it, that would be nice. And then this card, pretty much like the Cubby one. Cubby logo on the back. So yeah, I'm not a sports person at all, but I wanted to pick that one up because it was unique, and having it with all this paraphernalia is pretty neat. I at least vaguely know who Harry Carey is, enough to quote that SNL sketch. And I lived in Illinois, so, you know, Chicago Cubs, sure, why not? Okay, getting down to the dregs here. Oh, also, I'm looking over at the stuff that I have sitting on my bed. I should have shown these off earlier for the timeline, but here's Echo and Waves. These were part of that May 97 release batch that I talked about earlier, where the Canadian releases had the all caps tags. These, when they first came to the US, were mass produced with the wrong tags, where the blue one said Waves and the black one said Echo. And it's both tags. I'm not going to bother opening the thing up, but it'll be, this will always say Waves, this will say Echo. They were made that way for like a month or two, and then they switched back. By that point, beanies were pretty common anyway, so like a month or two a year prior would have been rare enough to where, like, yeah, that would be worth a lot of money. But by May 97 standards, it's not anything too special, really. So these are like $10. But here's a stupid one. I talked about this one in the vlog recently. So I have this spooky here because it was something that I found. It's a very minor thing that I just happened to notice, and nobody had noticed it before me, as far as I'm aware. So let me generation. I need to. Here, I've got a spinner. Okay, so if we look at Tush tags, we've got a lot of generations that look really similar to each other. So we have the Gen 3, which is Tie Heart, nothing to the left of it, Beanie Babies Collection TM, and then a name with no TM. Then we have Gen 4, which this is the one with the sticker, but you can get the idea at least. Beanie Babies Collection TM, no TM after the name, star to the left of the heart. Then we have Gen 5, which is Beanie Babies R Collection TM, and TM after the name. And eventually we have Gen 6, which, let me freaking find one here, which is Beanie Babies Collection R and TM after the name. So basically, it was just a matter of, like, the star was added and then the copyright symbols kind of moved. They're such minor changes that I don't even think they should be counted as separate generations, honestly, but that's what we count them as. And the Gen 6 Tush tag only comes with the Gen 5 hang tag with the Comic Sans text. Also, this is an original with 2 eyes. But why did I point all that out? That's because this spooky is a Gen 4 hang tag, which we can't tell because of the focus. Gen 4 hang tag, but a Gen 6 Tush tag. Beanie Babies with nothing after it, collection with an R, TM after name. That is a combination that should not exist. And as far as I can tell, this is the only beanie that ever existed on, and I was the first one to ever notice it. Does it make it worth any more? Probably not, because nobody knows about it. So spread the word. No, that's really all there is to it. It's a minor thing that I just happened to spot, and I'm like, that's weird. And I pointed it out in the ad, like to the admins, and Karen Boker's like, you know what, that's actually really weird. Like, I'm glad you found that, because I had argued in the past that, like, stuff like this might have happened, but, yeah, I don't know. That was pretty much the whole story. Wasn't very interesting. But, that happens to, coincide fairly well with Princess here, and Lord knows I've talked about Princess enough times in the past to where I don't need to talk about it again. But to hit the like absolute bare minimum of talking about this one, very common beanie that when it was first released was in limited supply, and then came back a few months later in much larger supply, and the market was flooded with them. And only the first ones are worth anything, and the way that you tell if they're the first ones is because they're made with PVC pellets. And this is the only time that the pellet type will ever matter. You don't need to worry about it on literally anything else. There's other things to look at with this one, but it's pretty much the same stuff that also applies to other beanies from the time. If it's made in Indonesia, worth a little bit more. If it's Indonesian and Canadian, then that's a plus. If it's Indonesian and Canadian and PVC, then you've got a winning combination, and those are worth like $150 to $200. But the common ones with the PE pellets are like, you know, 5 to 10. They're nothing special. And just to kind of show this off real quick, the hang tag on this one has like, it's a different font first of all, but the thing at the bottom with the like Memorial Fund info, there's a gap between the second and the third line there, and this is referred to as like the spaced tag. I'm not going to bother taking the tag protector off of this one, but rest assured there is no space on that one. The space was added a few months after the pellet type changed. So if you have a PVC, if you're only looking at the hang tag and it has a space, then you know that it's not worth anything because it's PE pellet. If it has no space, then it could go one way or the other. There's also allegedly a ghost version. We're not going to get into that. It doesn't exist. That's pretty much it. I've seen people say that like the color of the stitching on the rose can make a difference. That's not true. There's so many rumors on this one. It's really not a rare beanie. Even the PVC one is overvalued in my opinion, but it's at least notable. The other thing I'll say is the outside of the tag on this one looks like the Gen 4 font, and it's a Gen 6 Tush tag like the Spooky. So it was long debated, like, does this count as a Gen 4 or a 5? And the conclusion that was drawn is call it a Gen 5 because that's the only one that can come with this Tush tag. Like, the hang tag font is just, you know, it doesn't really matter because even the later releases have that same font. So it's a unique tag. It doesn't count as either generation, but it's called a Gen 5. And then I found the Spooky, and then that kind of threw a wrench into things. But that's basically it. Oh, and I've got this one here. Here's a really derpy face princess. I was sent this one for free. So sometimes these will pop up online, and not just for princess, but for like any bear. And people will be like, is this an old face? Is this something rare? What happened? Did manufacturing error? It's like, no, calm down. This is what you have is what we call damaged, because look at that. Look, that's what the face is supposed to look like. Why doesn't it look that way? Well, it's because there is a thread that is supposed to run between the eyes and then come out behind the ribbon that kind of scrunches the face together. And if that thread is cut or like just kind of breaks, then it just poofs out. And it's like, yep, Beanie's damaged. Congrats. That's pretty much it. Last two Gen 5s that I have of any note. I'm not going to consider the original tag on Germania to be noteworthy because it's not. But, oh, hold on, I gotta get my Britannia. Okay, so this is very similar to some of the other stuff. Pride is the most comparable here. But this is Spinner the Spider, and here it is with a tag that says Spinner, and here it is with a tag that says Creepy. And much like with Pride, Creepy was not the name of a beanie, and it doesn't say Creepy inside the hang tag, just kind of take my word on that one. It was just a very short-lived temporary name change exclusive to the ones that were made in Indonesia. And not all of the Indonesian ones say Creepy, only some of them do. Just kind of a really weird thing that happened. And I'll point out that the eye color on these is different. I think the Indonesian ones are more likely to have that brown thread. Minor thing, but whatever. And lastly, here is Britannia. Here's what Britannia is supposed to look like. Pretty standard bear with a ribbon and a flag. And here is the low quality reject version, which looking at them side by side, it's a little more evident in real life than on the camera, but this one's fabric is like really weird and kind of like overly fluffy. It has like more texture to it. The ribbon just kind of seems not as well tied, but the main thing about this is the flag, because on any of the beanies that have flags, they're supposed to be like this, where it's embroidered straight onto the fabric. This one was made as a separate patch and then was sewn onto the beanie really low and at a bad angle. And that was just kind of a trait of the Indonesian produced ones in general. Beanies were China and Korea up until early 97, and then they changed to being just China. And then at the start of 98, they started being made in China or Indonesia, and then they stopped making the Indonesian ones before the end of the year. And the reason for that was because they just kind of had like lower quality overall. And this was the most notable example, where there were a couple shipments made of the patch flag Britannia that they sent them out, and then like someone looked at it and was like, no, this isn't meeting our standards, don't make more of these. And so like only those first couple shipments that got out have this, and they're fairly rare. I still picked it up for relatively cheap. I've seen people claim this one is like insanely rare and valuable. It's not really, but it's an interesting piece of history nonetheless. And to try and wrap this up, because my throat is getting sore and we've been going for 2.5 hours here, my shelf is looking a lot more barren now than it was before. We're gonna have to fix that up later. But yeah, I've got the shelf down there. I'm not going to pull those out individually because they're not really worth looking at in any real detail. You can't see really on the back left there, that's where Liberty is. Then we have Lefty, Righty, Coral, Kiwi, which you can barely see. Yeah, it's back there. Then, ooh, my finger's like super laggy. Sting, Tusk, Tabasco, and Chops were the ones that retired in January of 1997. Was that all of them? It's Chops, Coral, Kiwi, Lefty, Liberty, Ready, Sting, Tabasco, Tusk, yeah. Those used to be worth a lot. They're not anymore, really. Then we have the ones that retired in May of 97, which are Bubbles, the Red Digger, which is not in there anymore. I took that one out earlier. Flash, Splash, which you can barely see. Garcia, Grunt, right there. Radar, Sparky. I think that's all those. So yeah, those were the May ones. Those were worth almost as much as the January ones back when they were worth anything, but now they're not, so it doesn't really matter. Then also in the back there, we've got Doodle the Rooster, right there, and Bongo, which I'll grab out here. So Bongo's a weird one. I really don't even want to talk about it at length, but when Bongo was first released, it had a tan tail, which is the same color as like the feet and the hands and the face. But it was named Nana, and that was a Gen 3. Nana changed its name after like a couple weeks, and the Nanas are super rare. Those are worth like well over $1,000. There's ones that say Nana directly on the tag. There's ones that have a sticker covering the name saying Bongo. The ones without the sticker are worth more, but even the sticker ones are still worth a lot. But then it was just Bongo, tan tail. Then they changed it to a brown tail, which just matches the rest of the body. That was around February 96, and then the brown tail stuck around for about a year until February 97, at which point it changed back to the tan tail, and then it stayed that way until it retired in December of 98. So, long story short, if we're talking about the Gen 4 version specifically, the brown tail is the rarer one. It's not really worth much more. It's $5 to $10. If we're talking about Gen 3, then the tan tail is the rarer one, but Nana is worth way more anyway. It's a stupid thing. It's more notable of a difference than like Hot Pink Magic, but it's still one that you don't really see people caring about that one too much. And that's gonna pretty much wrap it up. I did want to talk about Peace, but Peace is a subject unto itself, and requires a lot of detail, and I don't want to do it now. Peace needs its own video, so we will get to that at some point, but for now, that will be it. And I hope that you enjoyed me rambling for 2.5 hours, and I hope you learned some stuff if you were looking to learn stuff. And if you weren't, then I hope it was at least entertaining. But yeah, I will see you later on for potential Beanie stuff when I get around to doing tag timeline, or like tag details and timelines and all that stuff. Beanie info will never end. It is an endless pit of just being really, really overly nitpicky about things.